I'll do a little intro.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Master Your Life, the show of insight, intelligence, and inspiration, where I ask you each week to consider who is it you are right now and who is it that you are most striving to be? What is it you're trying to create in your life? I'm host Leah Mattinson, and this episode, I should say, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce my beautiful audience to Andrew, whose last name I'm going to butcher. So can you say it for us, Andrew?
Andrew Rouchotas.
See, I could have probably got that one, but you never know. So
I usually enjoy the butchering, to be honest with you. So.
Andrew Rouchotas with the very, very sexy long hair, because he is now doing a hair COVID protest cut, non-cutting. So also I was thinking maybe he's a rock star, or maybe he's trying out for NHL hockey. So it's hockey season. All of the above are possible. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to meet you, by the way, today, and a pleasure to be on the show.
Fabulous. Andrew caught my eye on Facebook, because somebody sent me this brilliant paper that you had written, Andrew, and I just thought it really gave a lot of contemplation to a span of decades where really there's been a lot of cybersecurity issues. There's been a lot of threats to personal data, not just threats, but actually executed operations where people have lost scads of money, and that over this span of decades that you could just see this thing repeating itself again, and how outraged you were that this potentially could be happening. So when I read that paper, and it was very well written, so for those of you who want to find any of Andrew's documents or writings or thinkings or speakings, he will share that with you towards the end of the show today. But it's worthwhile to take your time to read that. So what's a good jump off point right now, do you think, Andrew, for people to just kind of understand who you are, your background, and why they might care about cybersecurity?
Well, that's a fair enough question. I think everyone's got to care about cybersecurity. So let's start with that foundational footprint there. I've run a tech security company for around 20 years called Cartika here in Canada. And what we do is we move people's workloads, whether it's in-house applications, intranets, extranets, whatever applications people may be hosting, to the cloud. And before the cloud, it was just moving them to the data centers. So we provide compliance, for storing personal data. I think in the UK, you've got GDPR. I think that's what it's called now. And in Canada, it's PIPEDA. But there's just government compliance requirements for storing personal data. And the government's trying to get ahead of some of this theft of personal data that's going on. Now, we've been seeing this for 20 years. Cyber attacks are just everyday life for us. Traditionally, it was, the Russian hacker, or maybe an India outsourcing firm where they're stealing data. People are performing, extortion maybe on business owners, or maybe fraud on business owners trying to steal some money, or maybe there's ransomwareing people's data and then extorting them to unlock the data so they can get back to business. So that type of thing is bad enough. And, on the personal level, people are getting their personal identification stolen, fraudulent mortgages, credit card fraud, all that type of stuff. What really got me to start speaking was a more larger scale cyber threat, not only to Canada, but probably around the world. And that's run by the Communist government of China. So it's one thing when you get, little hackers here or there, or even more sophisticated hackers stealing data or extorting people for money, even mortgage fraud. That type of thing is serious enough. But when China seems to do it, it's the government of China that's involved. And to give you an example, this is the one I used in the paper anyway. Nortel is the most famous example. So I'll just review that quick, and then let me hear what you have to say. But China effectively, the military and the government infiltrated Nortel, stole all their data over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, threw all that IP, intellectual property, behind a new company started by the Chinese government, and that was Huawei. They effectively then went and competed on the market against Nortel's competitors and bankrupted them within 5 years, by 2009, maybe sooner. And you've got to understand, Nortel was the global jewel for tech, and it was Canadian.
Yes.
They controlled 70% of the internet traffic globally. They employed thousands and thousands of people. So between 2008, 2009, when they were bankrupted, today, we're speaking billions of dollars of the Canadian economy. We're speaking hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs, and we're speaking infiltration into a country where now they're trying to sell our own technology Huawei 5G back into our country. So now we're speaking national security threats. It just such a higher level than the Russian hacker trying to, extort you, extort a business owner, or ransomware a business's data. So that's kind of where this started, and it's kind of gone from there.
Yeah, and I encourage everybody who listens to any of my podcasts to please get a paper and pen out at the beginning. Sorry, guys, I forgot to remind you, but always have a paper and pen handy, because there's so many references of things to just go back and do a little bit more research about. For those of you who aren't old enough to know who or what Nortel is or was, because it was decimated. Many people lost because they were investors in Nortel. Lots of people invested lots of money in Nortel that were Canadians and worldwide, and lost their shirts in this thing that was a really great Canadian tech story, and just the evolution of human beings in general. I think it was a very inspiring business. And so there was a lot lost in that deal, even in terms of national identity. And maybe we shouldn't be too tied to identity because we're worldwide global now. But at that time, there was a lot of jobs that were lost in Canada. And then subsequently, I think we lost a lot of our intellectual property because people went to work in other countries sort of as a result. Was that also part of the fallout, Andrew?
Oh, absolutely. There was a brain drain out of Canada. I mean, that's thousands and thousands of high-tech jobs that were just suddenly gone. And there wasn't an immediate ability to fill that void from other companies. So Canada's invested heavily at a federal government level to try to build back up the tech sector. And there's very few significant tech companies based out of Canada anymore. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and we're not we're a good mid-sized company. For us now to be considered one of the tech footholds in Canada is embarrassing, to be honest with you, right? So I'm proud of our company, but we're not a Nortel, or we're not at that scale. And, other than some of the big telcos like a Bell or a Rogers, you might not know them over in the UK, but other than, TELUS, maybe, we don't really have any big innovative tech firms in Canada, at least not to that size that like we should have.
Right. And so what's the now more recent sort of cyber security attacks that people might recognize that would have touched them personally?
Well, I think the common things you see is everyone's getting hacked. The credit bureau got hacked, and all the data from the credit bureau got stolen. Just yesterday, the Democratic Party in the United States had all their data stolen, and all their customers and users' data stolen, all their donors' data stolen. So it's casinos. It just goes on and on.
Let's pause and think about that. Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Ashley Madison dating site, right? That's basically people who are married going looking for dates on a dating site, and all their data got stolen. All those people were extorted. So it goes on. And yeah, very much think about that, right, in your personal life.
Right. And so what does extortion look like? When you say extortion, what is it that happens to people when they're getting extorted? How do these people actually get leverage on them? Like the Ashley Madison thing, I get, because obviously you just call the husband or wife and say, I'll just tell on you. But with these other, bigger hacks, what is it that people are getting extorted with? Same sort of stuff?
Well, no, if it's a business, for example, let's say you run whatever, an accounting company, or let's say whatever firm you happen to run, and you have 10 to 100 people in your office there. And you have a couple servers with all your data, all your files, all your customers' files, whatever. They'll penetrate in, somebody goes home to watch a video about grooming their cats or something, and puts a video on a USB key, for example, brings it to the office, plugs it in, boom, ransomed. So what that means is they go and they lock all the computers with an encryption key, and they lock all the data on their servers with an encryption key. The virus just propagates just like it would amongst humans, amongst a computer network system, and everything's locked down. So assuming the company's done its job and has backups and whatever, their time to recovery may very well be, a week if they know what they're doing, right? To recover everything from scratch. Whereas when they turn on the computer or they turn on their server, there'll be a message saying contact this person. So it's a Gmail address or whatever. You contact them, they say, sure, we can give you a decryption key. You can be up and running within an hour, but it's going to cost you a Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoins. Well, or 5 Bitcoins, depends on the size of the firm. And when each Bitcoin is worth $10,000 or more now, I'm not sure what the current price is. You're speaking $10, $100, $200,000 is not uncommon. We've seen ransoms as big as $2 million for depending what firm it is. So that's pure extortion. Pay us or else you're kind of out of business. And companies will pay. 1, the insurance will cover it. 2, they don't want to admit to their customers they've had a data breach at that level. And 3, they don't want to be down for potentially weeks. And then when they find out their backups weren't in place like they thought they were, maybe they haven't tested them recently, maybe they can't recover, they could be out of business. So they're paying literally an extortion rate to stay in business.
Yeah, isn't that just, it's stunning. It's stunning and sickening. And though, even though I've worked corporately as an executive coach and know that this stuff happens but to
Every
actually
day.
just think about it in your life. MasterCard a couple of years ago, I got a letter from MasterCard. Maybe it was less than a couple of years ago. So I'm sorry, your identity's been breached. And my daughter also saw it. First of all, I thought, oh, it's a joke letter. The letter is a fraud. That was my first thought, was the letter is probably a fraud. And it was like, nope, that's the truth. So it's interesting how many orders of skip the dishes I've had on every single subsequent card that I've owned. And there's been a lot because there's been so much fraud on my credit card. It's like I can't get out of the loop of the fraud. Does that seem like a pretty normal experience from your perspective, Andrew, or am I just special?
It is day to day for the average consumer. Yeah, absolutely. Your credit cards, your debit cards, your mortgages now are becoming a big thing. So they're literally putting mortgages against your house via identity theft. That's really something you got to watch out for. That's a disaster. At least with credit cards, you're protected by the credit card company to a certain degree. They pass most of the liability onto the merchants, the people processing the credit cards. However, you're protected to some degree. But when they start getting into identity theft, and if you get your identity stolen from enough of these, whether it's MasterCards, casinos, dating sites, whatever, and they can put together enough identification on you to actually steal your identity and start putting mortgages against your houses, that's when you're in big trouble. And that's really difficult to reverse. And you're on the hook for that. So you had your house paid off, you had no idea. Suddenly you find out because, collectors start contacting you, you got a $500,000 mortgage on your house you had no idea about, right? Now you're on the hook for that. There's avenues you can take, but it's a very long and difficult process. So yeah, people should be very, very well aware of that and what's going on.
And so how would people typically be notified of that kind of a scam? And I'll call it a scam, but extortion or the use of identity theft, would it be a phone call from somebody or would it be actual proper mail? Like
So that type of thing,
yes.
Usually they'll rack up debt on your mortgage. They're just pretending to be you, right? And especially if your a property deed is available online, and they'll just forge signatures and they'll have enough of your identification and enough of your personal details where you're not contacted. And then, once they've accumulated debt, they'll stop paying. So then you'll be contacted when the debt's owed by a collector usually, right? And that's how you find out. So by that point, you're already in trouble. So that's newer on the landscape. The last year or so, it's become really, really popular, much more common. And again, it's just because of the amount of services who've had their data compromised and stolen, everything from the credit bureau. The credit bureau is the scariest one, right? Imagine all the data they've got on you.
Yeah.
So between casinos, MasterCard, credit bureaus, dating sites, whatever, who's had their data compromised, they can start to build user profiles and actually steal identities. And that's where it's becoming dangerous for the average person right now.
Right. So you say dating sites, does that include also porn sites? Because that's one of the hugest money makers, obviously, in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys aren't exactly dating sites, porn sites, et cetera, aren't exactly big on security, but as it's proven, it doesn't matter. Even if people, big organizations that tout how secure they are, MasterCard, right?
I know.
Credit bureaus, boom, hacked, right? So a lot of it's human error. A lot of it's just sophisticated hacking. And a lot of it's people just not taking security serious enough. It really is a big deal.
Right. So, and it is happening, and we see more and more of it. I agree. It's like the phone is ringing all the time. My phone rings every day, probably 3 or 4 times with different, from numbers that I'm not familiar with. So, like a V2000, whatever, 62 number phone call. I'm like, who the heck is that calling me? So I'm sure other people are receiving these kinds of calls or threatening calls that really aren't real credit collection, but just Joe Schmo trying to actually get money out of you. So, I've had the one where the CRA is going to come and, whatever. And I've had that one arrest me at the door. But thankfully, I'm intelligent enough to know that that's not real, but a lot of people are being actually extorted that are senior citizens or that are young people that just don't actually know that that's not the normal behavior of the CRA or of any sort of credible financial institution. So
I feel bad for people like that, though. It's really unsophisticated fraud is what that is, right? So, and that's targeting people who aren't sophisticated. The cyber stuff, you're not going to get phone calls. It doesn't work like that. but that's really unsophisticated kind of fraud. And what I'm upset about there is we should fight the unsophisticated fraud with sophistication and technology. And there's no reason for those phone calls to even be making it through to your phone. The providers should be able to stop those calls. They should, the same way I don't receive spam email, the spam filters are good enough to stop them, right? You should be able to remove spam phone calls pretty easily.
Yes, yes. And so that's good for people to know. So note to self and note to anyone else, if you're going through those kind of calls, give your provider a call and see what the world is going on, that you're getting those kind of calls, or if you're getting that kind of email, how you actually can take back control of your emails. So now to the bigger landscape, I guess, because I do think on a microcosmic level, people have to get the, how it's affecting them personally. So you've got your credit card frauds, you've got your debit card frauds, you've got your phone ringing at home with threats, sophisticated, unsophisticated, and then you're getting letters in the mail that may or may not be from real people. So there's all this sort of dystopia of what is actually truthfully happening right now and what isn't truthfully happening right now, and which I think is added on to at that psychological level because of the whole COVID thing. So lockdown measures, we're not able to talk to people like we normally would, the 6-foot rule, the, social distancing. We see people that would have, normally collected as groups being discouraged from collecting as groups. And that's where we talk about these things, one-on-one. And then we go, oh, yeah, you're right. That is kind of crazy. That shouldn't be happening. In businesses where you're providing this higher level of security, that still filters down to the regular population. But because they need to know who and what is behind all this stuff. So from your, not just perspective, but your experience, because this is what you do, who is it that is actually right currently now behind the scenes, kind of flipping the triggers on all this problem? For Canada anyway, and if you have a perspective on the world, that would be great to hear that too.
Well, I do, but this I've got to speculate on, give my opinion, very educated opinion, mind you. But this isn't as much cybersecurity as much as it's. I see a big problem with communist China on many levels, and I don't think it's just them, but I think they're playing a pretty major role in it. The public health policies that have been pushed onto our society are flagrant communist China public health policies. That's how they've been handling outbreaks for years, and this is not how the free world handles viral outbreaks. So you don't quarantine healthy people. Quarantine by definition is putting sick people in medical quarantine to prevent the transmission of a virus or pathogen or bacteria or something along those lines. Quarantining healthy people by definition is house arrest. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. And that is a very, communist kind of public health policy measure. So when you understand that, then you've got to start asking some pretty serious questions. Why are we taking this approach? What's pushing this approach? You look in Canada, and it becomes more concerning when you look in Canada. This is 660 News published this article, and it just goes away. It's very, very quiet. But the last two public health officers that occupied Canada's senior medical role, and 18 of our top epidemiologists, which would make pretty much the whole epidemiology profession in Canada, spoke out against these measures for all sorts of reasons. But the media will put out the article one time and then it'll disappear. Instead, they'll start talking about COVID infections again and increased measures, masking, mandatory masking, more lockdowns. And I just find that asinine. I find it really frightening that they're pushing this on society and people are just going along with it while our private sector is being destroyed, small businesses being destroyed. We're moving thousands and thousands of people to permanent government assistance. I mean, we're looking more and more like China every day and less like Canada. So you'd have to be, if you're not questioning what's going on around you at this point, there's something seriously wrong. You should start at least questioning it.
Yeah, like it becomes that you're like a psychopathic individual if you can just sort of go along with the draconian measures that are really not based in scientific numbers. And the person who made up the testing for the COVID actual test said this is not meant to be used for the testing that you're using it for. So there's lots of science on the background of where this testing procedure came from. The deaths attributed to coronavirus are under 10,000 worldwide. And I've had lots of people push back on that. They go, no, it's like 200,000 in the state, 200,000 here and 200,000 there. It's not 200,000. That's for comorbid aspects of it. So if you were already sick with something else and then you died, that they've now are saying is coronavirus, but it's actually not. On the death certificates of people with coronavirus deaths is under 10,000 worldwide. And even if it was 200,000, think about flu season. I just want people to think about it. Look at the CDC in the US. They stopped taking stats for flu the day that they started tracking stats for COVID, for coronavirus in the US. And so you can see that that's the seasonal flu uptick is going to happen just like it does every single year. Other big news flash, we die, people. In this body, we die. So when somebody at 94 years old dies and you say that it is coronavirus, chances are it's their 94 and they probably had some comorbid factors. Do we want to see people dying early, and, unwell and all that stuff? Of course not. But for the actual lockdown measures that have been taken, they are extreme and they're killing economies. And the other stat I think that people are missing out entirely in this comorbidity thing is suicide. So if we're going to call something created or, give it to the label of coronavirus, add in suicide, because it certainly is creating about 6 times more suicides in the UK for sure. I'm not sure what the Canada uptick is, but it's very, very, very high and very significant. So just food for thought for people to contemplate.
I don't think it's just suicide. So to touch on that, and what's really got me going and really got me going after our politicians, there's 2 factors. I'm going to push back a little bit on the 10,000 deaths or 20,000 deaths. Look, it's a legitimate virus.
Yes.
People with multiple comorbidities may very well not have died had Corona not come around, even if the flu had come around. So I don't want to be dismissive of that or underestimate the numbers from the CDC. What I do get from that is obviously they've overinflated numbers. There's no disputing that, right? They're very open about it, dying with versus dying of it, or 2 specific definitions. So, but taking that into account, the appropriate path still wouldn't have been to lock everybody in their homes and put masks on them. I mean, instead of spending $300 billion in Canada, or more, probably through $500 billion, so $500 billion in Canada to keep the rest of the economy up and keep everybody locked in their homes. Mm-hmm. What I would have probably done is quarantined all the nursing homes. Is the first thing I would have done. And I remember when I first said that, people thought I was insane, but you could literally pay these healthcare workers and these doctors and these medical professionals 5 years of labor for 1 year, 6 months of work to make sure these people are taken care of and let the virus burn through society, the people who weren't vulnerable to that virus. We knew very early on it was elderly. We watched our elderly be slaughtered in nursing homes, which I'll never forgive our government for. Right. These are people that fought for a country, died for a country, worked and paid taxes their whole lives, and we just abandoned them in nursing homes to die miserably and alone. So I'll never forgive our government for that. But to your point about suicides, what's really concerning me in Canada is our excessive death rate over and above anything they're even attributing COVID is soaring. Suicides, overdoses, murders, right? And what's also concerning me, so we're already seeing an order of magnitude over anything they're attributing to coronavirus of deaths from, COVID lockdown measures. Okay, well, that's pretty concerning. So now if you're suffering from mental health, the chances of you committing suicide or having a drug overdose resulting in death now went up 500%. So what are we accomplishing here? Is this about saving lives or not? And lastly, the thing that's most concerning me, absolutely, because I think we're sitting on a mass casualty event about to happen here in Canada and probably elsewhere, is the diagnosis for cancer and heart disease, which are the number 1 and 2 killers in Canada, are down 80% since the COVID lockdowns. So you're telling me 80% less people actually developed heart disease and cancer? Well, of course not. 80% less people were diagnosed with heart disease and cancer. So they're not being diagnosed, they're not being treated, they are going to die. Those are our number 1 and 2 killers. So how many? We're speaking tens of thousands of people, which is orders of magnitude on its own over what COVID killed, either with COVID or of COVID. So what are we talking about here? Forget about the economic impact. Forget about everything else. Just the pure loss of life is asinine what we're doing. And for some reason, they just keep pumping this narrative and keep pumping. I'm positive that the upcoming election in the U.S. has a lot to do with this, but still, this is a tax-paying population that deserves a lot better than this. So that's that was a bit of a rant there, but
Right. Well, no, I think that's perfect, Andrew. I think more people ought to get on a rant. And even if you don't agree with 100% of anything that anybody says, when they're having a passionate, actual thoughtful response to what's going on, it's so inhuman. Early on, months ago now, I said, what is the definition of humanity? Like, this is what we need to think about. What is it to be human? Like, we're not even thinking about that. So I think congratulations and hats off to you in that same spirited light of going, it's inhuman to let our loved ones die unattached in a nursing home without their family around them. And we permission it. We permission this stuff because we're afraid of the consequences. We're afraid of being embarrassed of getting arrested, being embarrassed of getting a ticket, being like, why are we such chicken shits? I'm going to say, I'm a farm girl. It's like, okay. It's a little bit, I think people are very, so afraid of the consequences that they just honestly are paralyzed. I had grandparents try to shame me into not seeing my grandchildren when this whole thing started. Like, the good grandparents stand outside the house with the present for the kids and they don't go in. And I'm like, well, your idea of what a good grandparent is and mine are different. To health and wellness, I've been a health coach for my whole life, almost my entire life. I've been paid to be a health coach. We have a neurological disease in our family, which requires me to educate myself about neurological health and well-being, and to be protective of other people and to think about their well-being, but from a social perspective. So heart disease, personal responsibility, cancer, personal responsibility. We've allowed all these pharmaceutical companies and our medical system to actually hijack our health and wellness. So and the only people making money in this whole storm of poop is the people who have made you sick and the people who are continuing to keep you sick, keeping you in your house, and you need more medication. When this all ends up, you either need drugs that are, not prescribed by the doctor, but now you can even get marijuana prescribed from the doctor, or wine. Like, the wine stores are open, but not the gym.
Not the gym.
And not that people need to go to the gym. Let me just say that. You do not need to go to the gym. That is not a bastion of wellness. I don't mean that at all. It's just ironic that all of the places that you could collect at one point that were, at least trying to operate under the guise of well-being, spiritual well-being, have all been shut down, but everyone that's peddling dope of any kind or numbing out pharmacy is open and welcome for business, and even the medical profession, so to all the frontline, I have lots of frontline friends that are nurses and doctors who are they're making money, they're working, but they're all making money, they're working. And the people who are producing your masks, 3M and all the other manufacturers, they're making money for these masks. So designer masks are probably the hottest selling item. They're probably selling more masks. And if Dr. Tam had her way, body condoms, for those of us that she was going to allow to have sex. Do you want to talk? It's just so funny, hey, where things have gone.
Well, it's when she came out publicly. I mean, this is a chief medical officer of Canada, okay? Right. And when she comes out publicly and says that you should be wearing a mask and use glory holes to have sex with your spouse, I'm not sure how to respond to that. No, I can't respond to it without using foul language for sure. And I definitely don't want to say something that's going to get me in trouble, but that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And she should be ashamed of herself for calling herself a medical professional at this point.
Right. And so just
stay out of my bedroom, by the way, stay out of my bedroom. Right?
Stay out of my bedroom, 100%. But so people know that are living in Canada, that is not rhetoric that isn't being said around the world by all the public health officials in every country. So if you go to Australia and find out what's going on in there, like find out what's being said day to day, it is cookie cutter from country to country, what is being said by public health officials and governments. So it is important for people to educate themselves not only about what's going on in their homeland, but to see it as something that is going on in the world. And that way you go, like, why is there all this collusion? Like, why do they want people to die? Doesn't that undermine your, income tax sort of, that you're going to be collecting from all the masses? Well, the truth is that the income tax creating people are not the ones who are in jeopardy of dying of this thing. There's the people who are dying of this thing are people who are expensive to keep around. And as morbid as that sounds, it's just something to contemplate. So that's my little, just think about things.
Very suspicious that, it's very suspicious because that is how a communist organization would act. And for them to wipe out the people that are going to cost them the most amount of money is something that communist countries have done repeatedly throughout history. So it's very suspicious. The thoughts cross my mind, but I try very hard to stick to what I know is factual.
Sure.
And then when it's suspicious, I just say it's suspicious, but I've had that thought. I think that's fair, right? I think it's very fair to say that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you know, they're gaslighting. The media is gaslighting you, and I know they're doing this around the world. But the last 2 weeks, they've been pumping us with narratives repeatedly. All day, it's coming across my phone that people who don't adhere to the mandatory masking and mandatory social distancing and mandatory lockdown rules are representative of narcissistic sociopaths.
Right.
And they're publishing in the press every day. So now you're calling me a sociopath because I'm questioning you.
Yes.
And, you know, people repeat that. Oh, you don't want to wear a mask. What's wrong with you? You're a sociopath, right? That's what studies show. What studies? Are you insane? Like, it's just,
you must be a Nazi. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just gaslighting us constantly. It's so infuriating, right? So you got to just laugh. At some point, you just got to laugh at it. But at the same time, you've got to be able to educate people and at least get people to start asking questions, which is what I always try to do.
Yes. Beautiful. And yes, Nazi is another one that I've heard recently, or some sort of special kind of stupid. I get that one occasionally too. I'm like, oh, you're so cute. But I just send back love because that's what I do. And it's a good thing, and education. But a little bit about why are you educated and what's your, you know, because you have some experience, Andrew. You're not a homegrown Canadian. So can you share a little bit about, you know, your background and why you might have a different perspective than just somebody who's, you know, 30 and lived here their whole life in Canada in particular?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'll tell you a little story. I don't share, but I'm going to share it. You're going to enjoy this. So my family, this part I've shared, but my family's right off the boat. We came here with $50 a suitcase and nobody could speak English, right? So, but my parents believed in Canada. We escaped socialist communist hellholes. We were very happy to be here. We worked our butts off. We never accepted welfare or anything like that. We worked hard, you know, you know, my dad worked hard his whole life, and when he finally passed, you know, he'd accumulated some wealth, and his kids, all his 3 sons, have worked hard, started their own businesses. So you can do it in this country, and that's what we all, just a fair shot, equal opportunity, right? That's what we want, equal opportunity. We don't want equal outcomes, we want equal opportunity. So, but I married a generational Canadian. She's been here for, you know, I don't know, her family's been here for 10 generations, 15 generations. And so I started telling her, hey, look what's going on. She thought I was insane, right? We couldn't even talk about it. This is my spouse, right? And I go, I've seen this before. When you start seeing identity politics like this, when you start seeing systemic oppression and oppressed versus oppressor, this is Marxist communist crap. Like, you got to recognize it. So the reason I started writing on Facebook initially, and, you know, now I've got sites and pages where I put content on videos and audio and stuff I write. But the reason I started writing, because I couldn't have the conversation with my wife, so it would pop up on her Facebook feed and she'd have to frickin' read it. And it took about two years of beating her over the head with it before she finally started to ask some questions. So it's, if you're from Canada and you've lived a privileged, entitled life, and your biggest complaint is how hard it is being, you know, brown. I'm considered beigeish brown myself, right? How hard it is being a woman, or like, honestly, stop your whining. You've got it really, really good. You're more privileged just being in Canada, living in Canada, being a Canadian citizen. You're more privileged than 98% of the world. So let's start from there. So whatever your problems may be, we can work on it as a society, but don't be talking about how oppressed you are and how hard you have when you're better off than 98% of the people walking around the planet. So I think it's really frustrating. And I think the people that have been born and raised here and have been here for generations and haven't seen what it looks like when you allow Marxism and socialism and communism, and it's all the same crap at the end of the day. When you allow that to infiltrate your politics and your society, it's just very easy to think, well, things should be fair. Things should be, you know what fair for everybody looks like? It looks like the governments have all the money and everyone else is poor. That's what it looks like. And you're eating cats and dogs, and don't think that can't happen, because that's what happens. Right. Sorry, that's a big rant, but there you go.
Yeah. And it's important for people to know the frame of reference that not only you come from, but many people who've had families that have been haven't been here for generation after generation, because it informs the population about looking at things differently. And to your point, I've got lots of friends who are working in education that have been here for generations and generations, and they just expect that they should get paid for, you know, educating the kids, but they don't think they should have to stand up to these draconian mask laws. So they'll go to school, September, school rolled in, mask laws happened, and they're all kind of murmuring amongst themselves about, you know, we kind of know it isn't right, but we all need our paychecks, but, you know, but, and so there's this level of tolerance that is, it's an old military thing, which is just lockstep. It's like we try to make things okay, and you know, you're going to put up with things. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's okay, because then you still get your paycheck. You'll still get your paycheck as long as you can kind of go along. You'll still get your paycheck, and then they, you know, suck in your rights more and more and more, and just see how much more you can tolerate. And to Canada's sad state of affairs is that we've all become so asleep with our fat calf life that we really don't do anything to stop it. It's like, oh, well, okay. Got my 2 grand, got my 8 grand, got my house.
Well, I'll say it as bluntly.
Yeah.
We have a lot more to lose in our jobs. So at some point, and by the way, we'd let it get this far where now you're going to lose your job. You should have spoken up a long time ago. What happens when you get equality of outcome is you allow malicious people. They don't care about gender. They don't care about race. I absolutely promise you. In some countries, they do it based on class. They do it based on variations of religion, or they do it whenever it's just turning groups against other groups. So when you hear systemic issue, what that means by definition is the desire, the requirement to tear down the system to put in a new one. Well, what do you think the new system is, right? And so they really don't care about gender or anything else. What they care about is putting people that are compliant with their ideological perspective in positions of power, and they'll use any opportunity to do so. So, you know, when Me Too swept through, how many men in powerful positions got replaced by ideologically slanted women in those positions? And they didn't care whether they were women or not. What they cared about was the shared ideology that they had. And now what's the after effect to prove they don't care about women? Because of how many false allegations there were, because of how, you know, think of the U.S. Supreme Court, what they tried to do because they didn't want a judge with a certain ideology implemented in the Supreme Court. And look at what they did over that. Look at the accusers against Joe Biden, the people who've accused Joe Biden in the U.S. of sexual misconduct, and nobody even focuses on it. So what's happened from the Me Too movement? It got used to implement ideological aligned people into positions of power, and now women who really need help can't get it. So where the heck did this movement help women at all? Where?
Yeah. BLM is same thing. BLM, nobody is, anyone who's funding that thing, all of them are white guys funding that thing, and not a single black person's getting a cent out of that, really. You know, so we've got to get our proverbial, it's all really slick marketing though, isn't it, Andrew? Like decades.
Double entendre, right? It's a double entendre. So Black Lives Matter. Well, of course, Black Lives Matter. Now, how about the organization Black Lives Matter? The mission statement Black Lives Matter, whoever can't get behind that is there's something wrong with you, of course. Right. And if that community feels like they need attention and they need some change, okay, I'm here to help them and participate. But the actual organization driving it, the Black Lives Matter organization, is a communist revolutionary organization. They don't even hide it. They say it right on their website, right? One of their main primary objectives is disruption of the Western nuclear family. Well, I'm sorry. Who are you to do that? What really concerns me about them, so like I've had to cut out watching sports. I can't.
Yes, me too.
They've infiltrated, right? So you see LeBron James, a basketball player up there, preaching about systemic oppression in the US. Well, LeBron, and I hope to God he hears this. I really do. Because I have too little of a voice for him to hear typically. But LeBron, you're a rich and famous celebrity, one of the richest people in the world. That's systemic oppression. Okay. Maybe the people around you grew up with and you feel they're not getting a fair shake. Okay, that's fair. I can abide by that. But he won't say a word about communist China. He won't say a word where there's 1 million Muslim Uyghur slaves enslaved in communist China right now, working as slave labor within the supply chain of all of his sponsors, Nike, Apple, whatever. So he's sitting here screaming about systemic oppression in the US. He won't say a word about China. He's being paid off the backs of slavery today. That's systemic oppression, LeBron, not what's going on in the US. So if you want to enact change in the US, You should use your position and your authority to enact change. You should be a role model. You shouldn't be sitting there crying about how hard you have it when you're one of the richest people and most powerful people in the world. And by the way, you should be willing to take a cut of your paycheck, your hundreds of millions of dollars you're making a year, to work on freeing those Uyghur Muslim slaves from your freaking sponsor supply chain. So it's just hypocrisy all the way around. And the fact that entitled little shit, sits up there and screams about Black Lives Matter while these companies are funding the Black Lives Matter organization, and he's monetizing off the backs of slaves, I can't say it enough, is the most disgusting thing I've ever witnessed. And that's what's wrong with our society right now.
Yes. And there's multiple examples of that. That's just the most recent one. So it's
correct.
And to our dystopia again, it's like the opening up of our eyes. That's why people listen to this show or follow the show, is because they're trying to get some insight about why is it that my life is so hard and screwed up and messed up, and that I keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Well, a lot of it is because you have had the TV on a lot. You've got all these, idols that are people that really, idolatry in and of itself means you're taking away from your own creative process in the world. So we've got all these idols, whether it's a sports idol or it's the music idol or American Idol, Canadian Idol, whatever it is, Survivor, the million reality shows, instead of living your own life, take us away from really paying attention to what's happening in the world right now for real. So in our real lives, we're so distracted, we don't actually see all this stuff that's going on. And when we do get the little glimpses, a lot of times you just go, ooh, I don't really want to know about that. Ooh, I don't really want to know about that. I don't really want to know about that either. But until you actually know about it, at least at some level, you really honestly can't do anything about it. So you're going to continue to let people die in nursing homes alone. You're going to continue to let kids wear masks and go to school masked and gagged, and breathing in their own oxygen and not seeing each other's little faces, not being allowed to hug. You're permissioning it. And so until you actually getting is acknowledging what's going on. So first of all, there's the acknowledgement of, okay, there's cybersecurity threats, there's human trafficking, there's slavery that's happening, and there's much deeper and worse things than that happening in the world. I like to try to keep it a little bit light on the show, because there is a lot of heaviness, but there's also this light that's happening for people too. There's a really big opportunity right now when you're sitting at home with these draconian laws coming in, where you recognize it for what it is. So whether it's communism, fascism, like the list that goes on, and understand that it's not the first time that this has happened. It's happened in other countries. It's happened decades ago. It's been the programming for the last 100 years, at least, through marketing and PR. So you're part of this big system of an alternate story, an alternate storyline. Even the food that we eat is compromised for the most part, so full of pesticides and glyphosate, et cetera, and on and on. So we've got all of this toxic stuff happening. We've got being locked down. We've got security threats. And, a lot of people just are sitting on their couch numbed out, but the people who are actually awake to it, it's the most awesome time also, because then you can go, all right, how am I going to do something about it?
Well, I started speaking. It is, by the way, the work you're doing, people like you're doing, and I'm trying to start doing now. I think that's what's needed. I think people need alternate avenues to the programming pumped down their from their TV. And you got to understand, the media is owned by a small group of people in both countries, U.S. and Canada. They're very heavily owned by subsidiaries, either owned or influenced by communist China. You're getting very communist propaganda. There was an article in the newspaper today flagrantly defending China. This is a Canadian newspaper, flagrantly defending China against the U.S. and calling the U.S. evil for taking actions against China. And Canadians are buying this. Like, how could the U.S. do this? Are you insane? They're our allies. They protected us. We'd be gone without. The only reason Canada's Canada and we're allowed to live here is because the U.S. is sitting there with a huge army, and we've got a massive, the biggest, largest unprotected border in the world between Canada and the U.S. They don't want some foreign country occupying that country. It's the only reason we've been able to live free. And now we're sitting here because our media is telling us China's evil, and we're aligning with China. It's got to stop. So, and what I started to say, and I got sidetracked there, was since I started doing this when the lockdowns first happened, I was publishing, I just started pushing out some content saying, guys, this is wrong. Just on my Facebook, just to my friends, right? This is wrong. I lost friends over this. I lost whatever. People got really upset with me. No, we got to listen. You got to protect others. This isn't about protecting others. But now as time's gone on, you know, I push out this content and it's just exploding. People are ready to listen. You know, I'm pushing out the content through many channels now. I think people now are hungry for an understanding of what's going on, because even the most diligent people who originally said, no, we got to do these lockdowns, this is for public safety, even they're starting to question what's going on around them. So I think it's really important. I feel bad because you don't want to insult people. They make it hard because they come at you in an insulting way. You're selfish, you're whatever, right? Whatever names they call you. But it's really important that we all get back on the same side, because the division is what they're after. The division based on skin color, based on sexual organs, right? Whether you're male or female, a division based on ideology, whether you want to mask or not mask. These are all divisions that these malicious practices prey upon. So it's really incumbent upon us to make friends, not enemies, with the people who believe differently than we do today.
Yeah, brilliant, beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very fortunate again to have had lots of experience in this, because my daughter decided when we had the oldest grandson that she wasn't going to have him vaccinated. And so that was a big deal in our family. The mother-in-law is a nurse. And so it's like she was just gotta have them vaccinated. It didn't matter how much information my daughter sent to her. She's a smart person, and sent to her that she just refused to read it. She refused to look at it. And now 6 years later, of course, all this information is coming out about vaccine harm, and that people are more contemplative about vaccines. That there's the middle line of learning, are there times when vaccines are good? Are there times when it's not? Under what circumstances is that not a good idea? Versus it's all just from hell and Satan and or it's all just so great and frolicking, through the bushes, and it's, everyone should be vaccinated for everything. So people need to get educated, but be developing a mindset of curiosity instead of that survival perspective of, the fight, flight. As soon as somebody calls you a name, it's like you automatically have the automatic response of your nervous system kicking in, that central nervous system going, oh my God, fight, flight, freeze, dissociate. But that's actually what makes us psychopaths, is our inability to go, all right, how would I actually educate somebody around this, or accept education from somebody else around this thing, so that we could actually have a conversation that was about our hearts and our minds working together in harmony, which is collaborative.
Right. We'll always be learning, right? Always be willing to learn something. I try to learn something from everybody I meet, and I hope to be able to impart something on everybody I meet, right? We may not always get along, but I think that what's been ingrained in us, if we don't get along, we're enemies, is really what we've got to overcome. And that's on purpose, right? If we don't agree on whatever ideological point, we're enemies. And that's not right. So that's where the big problem is. We used to be able to disagree on politics. We used to be able to disagree on sports. We used to be able to disagree on these things and still be family and friends, right? And now they're, tears apart family, tears apart friends. So we've really got to be careful that way. I think on vaccines, of course, it's probably one of the greatest medical creations of our time. And it's probably, it's cured polio. It's pretty much exterminated polio. They've been responsible for so much good, but it's also scary. I myself, which is why I wear these sunglasses, took a vaccine and developed a really nasty side effect. Autoimmune Graves' disease was triggered from a vaccine. It ruined 10 years of my life. So I'm very familiar with the downside of vaccines as well, but I'm still a proponent of them. What concerns me is, for example, with my daughter, we didn't want to vaccinate her right away. That they've increased the density and they've increased the frequency, and they start them early. So we simply wanted to delay the vaccines. We wanted to get one at a time. Well, that's really hard. They package them all together now, right? And they start them so young. So just for us to even delay them, spread them out, delay the frequency, delay the magnitude of them and how many you're taking at one time. We had to go in front of justices of peace and prove that we're of sound mind and body. We had to sign all this waivers and stuff. And I'm not even against vaccines. And that's what they put me through, right? I'm actually very pro vaccines. Now, would I take a vaccine for COVID if it came out tomorrow? Well, no, right? Why would I do that? That'd be a brand new vaccine. It hasn't been tested. And developed vaccines take years. Would I take a polio vaccine or a tetanus vaccine? Sure, I would, right? They've been around for decades and decades, and they've been proven. So I think people just have to use their common sense with anything else. Would you take any other drug? Unless you're on your deathbed and it was an experimental drug that maybe saved your life, it might kill you. Okay, I might take that chance. But against the virus, it's got a death rate of 0.02% or whatever, just above the flu. Am I going to risk a vaccine that's new and not really tested? Well, no, that just mathematically and logically makes no sense. So I think, I think there is a happy medium to say I'm not against vaccines. I don't think anybody should be against vaccines, but I also think that we should become educated, be more careful, and be selective. And I think that's a fair statement. So when they start talking about potential mandatory vaccines, well, that scares the crap out of me, right? I don't want you putting a needle in me I don't approve of, but I'm not even against the damn things. I know there's a lot of people who are petrified of vaccines and just hard set against them. Now you're going to force those people to take a needle? That's got psychological warfare, right? Like, it's not even nice. So
I know. Well, and it's beyond not nice. So and we're out of time, Andrew. We've got so much more to talk about. So
great. No.
I would love to have you on again if you're game to do that.
Sure, it's a pleasure. You're a lot of fun to talk to, and you got a great perspective, and you're open to new ideas, and new concepts. And I really, really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I do too. It's like, and the learning is always continuing, which I encourage people, always do your own research. We have so many great research scientists and research people that have been on this show and that spark you to think about things. It's up to you to be the master of your own vessel, this vessel that we've been given here on the world, in this earth. It's your job to be the master of it. It's also your job to be the master and protector of the little ones. So do your research. Don't base anything on anything anybody else is trying to sell you. Like, do the research about what's in the vaccines, whatever they are, and don't just go by. The doctors will even say to you that they do not know anything about vaccines. They know about the vaccine schedule. And thank you very much. And I love them because they're honest, right? That's not what they're here for, is to know what's in it. That's our job, to be responsible for that. So we're out of time. Andrew, again, thank you so much. Everyone, please love each other, love yourselves, mind your mind, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks so much. Bye.
If you enjoyed today's interview, please consider becoming a supporter of the show. The clear mission of Master Your Life has been to be as devoid, free, and separate from corporate, church, and government funding, influence, and interference as matter is to antimatter. Master Your Life has been a platform for free speech since 2016. So please check us out on Patreon, Master Your Life. Thanks everyone for your support. Looking forward to seeing you on the next episode.